There are relationships between nations that defy the ordinary grammar of diplomacy. The relationship between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran is not, and has never been, merely a disagreement between governments. It is a wound, one that has been opened, sutured, reopened, and cauterized so many times that the scar tissue itself has become the architecture of interaction. To understand it, one must resist the temptation of simplicity. Hegemonic stability, that grand organizing theory of post-war American foreign policy, presupposes a world in which the dominant power sets the rules. The dollar anchors trade. The carrier fleet secures sea lanes. The alliance structures bind the wayward. And the outliers are managed. Iran refused to be managed. When we speak of the politician, the legislator, the president, the Ayatollah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we are speaking of someone who inhabits two worlds simultaneously. There is the world of stated principle,
and there is the world of operational reality. In Washington, the politician who speaks loudest about Iranian aggression is also, quietly, aware of what Iranian stability is worth to the region's energy calculus. In Tehran, the revolutionary who denounces the great Satan from the podium knows with equal precision what access to Western capital markets would mean for a population whose patience is not infinite. The political language of this conflict has always been theatrical, and theater, as any honest observer will tell you, is designed not to reveal, but to conceal. From the 1953 coup, engineered in Langley, executed in Tehran, to the hostage crisis of 1979, to the shadow war of the present day, the political class on both sides has required a perpetual enemy. The enemy is useful. The enemy justifies the budget. The enemy unifies the electorate. The enemy postpones the harder conversation, the one about accountability, about governance, about the distance between the revolution's promises and the revolution's outcomes. This is not cynicism. It is cartography. We are simply describing the terrain. Let us now speak of money. The international banker occupies the most unsentimental position in this entire tableau. He does not require that you be a democracy. He does not require that your human rights record meet any particular standard. What he requires, what he has always required, is that your debt be serviceable, that your reserves be verifiable, that your currency, however debased by embargo and isolation, retains some relationship to reality. Iran sits atop the fourth largest proven oil reserves on the planet. It commands the northeastern shore of the Strait of Hormuz, through which, on any given morning, between 15 and 20% of the world's traded oil passes. To the financial architecture of the global economy, this is not a rogue state. This is an asset, one that has been placed temporarily and at considerable cost beyond reach. The sanctions regime, OFAC designations, SWIFT exclusions, the weaponization of dollar clearing systems, is, at its most fundamental, an act of financial warfare. It is asymmetric warfare, conducted not with drones or carrier strike groups, but with correspondent banking relationships and trade finance restrictions. And yet the banker, whether sitting in Frankfurt, Tokyo, Dubai, or the glass towers of Lower Manhattan, watches this situation with the particular alertness of someone who knows that exclusion is not permanent, that every sanction has a shadow economy attached to it, that Iranian oil has found its way to Chinese refineries, to Indian ports, through a labyrinth of shell companies and flag of convenience vessels, because the market will always find a price. What the banker understands and what the politician is reluctant to say aloud is this: the market pricing of personality, the idea that individual leaders, their rhetoric, their ideological commitments, their very identities can be discounted or premiumed into sovereign risk calculations, is one of the central fictions of modern geopolitics. Presidents come and go. Oil fields do not. The 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal, was, whatever its political dressing, an act of financial reintegration. Within days of its signing, European delegations were in Tehran, not to discuss philosophy, to discuss contracts, pipeline routes, Airbus orders, automotive assembly plants.
The speed with which commerce followed diplomacy told you everything about what the sanctions had actually been costing. And when the agreement collapsed, when the architecture was dismantled, when the maximum pressure policy reimposed the walls, the banker did not weep. He simply recalculated and waited. The foreign diplomat, by which I mean the third-party envoy, the European Union special representative, the Omani back channel, the Swiss protecting power, occupies a position of extraordinary delicacy. Washington and Tehran have not maintained formal diplomatic relations since April of 1980. That is over 4 decades without an embassy, without a direct line, without the ordinary machinery of state-to-state communication. What exists instead is a system of proxies, of intermediaries, of carefully maintained deniability. Diplomatic decorum, that elaborate system of protocols, of communiques, of carefully chosen venues, and deliberately vague language, exists precisely because direct confrontation between nuclear-capable states is, to put it plainly, inadvisable. The diplomat speaks when the general cannot. The diplomat opens the door that the politician has publicly sworn to keep shut. The Europeans have played this role with varying degrees of conviction and competence. France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the E3, served as architects of the JCPOA framework, believing, perhaps too optimistically, that a multilateral agreement could survive the domestic politics of its primary guarantor. They were wrong. But they were not naive. They understood that their own energy security, their own trade relationships, their own geopolitical coherence as a bloc depended on a region that was not perpetually on the edge of conflagration. The Sultanate of Oman has been the most consistently useful back channel in this relationship. It maintains warm ties with both Washington and Tehran. Its geography, commanding the southern mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, gives it a strategic leverage that punches far above its demographic weight. When American and Iranian officials needed to speak without speaking, they frequently found themselves, by some coincidence, in Muscat. And then there is the question of the wider region. Saudi Arabia, Israel, the Gulf states, each with their own calculations, their own red lines, their own lobbying architectures in Washington, their own covert programs designed to shape the trajectory of Iranian power. The foreign diplomat must navigate not 2 parties, but a constellation of interests, each of which claims the right to veto any accommodation it finds threatening. This is the fundamental paradox of multilateral diplomacy. The more stakeholders you invite into a negotiation, the more points of failure you introduce. Peace, in this context, requires a narrowing, a room with fewer people in it, a conversation that can be denied. The foreign diplomat knows this better than anyone and carries it quietly as a burden. The corporate lawyer is the least visible actor in this drama, and perhaps, over the long arc of history, the most consequential. Every sanction is a legal instrument. Every sanctions designation triggers a cascade of contractual obligations, of force majeure clauses, of regulatory compliance reviews that extend from Washington to the smallest trading house in Hamburg. The corporate lawyer is the person who reads the fine print of geopolitics and bills accordingly by the hour. But let us not be dismissive. The legal architecture of the US-Iran relationship is genuinely extraordinary in its complexity. The International Court of Justice has adjudicated disputes between them. The Iran-US Claims Tribunal at The Hague has processed thousands of claims since 1981, a quiet, bureaucratic machine processing the wreckage of a relationship, awarding damages, establishing precedents, functioning as a kind of permanent institutional acknowledgement that the 2 countries are, whether they wish it or not, deeply entangled. The corporate lawyer advising a multinational energy company on Iranian market re-entry, in those brief windows when sanctions ease, must navigate OFAC's regulatory labyrinth with the precision of a surgeon. One miscalculated transaction, one Iranian counterparty that appears on a designation list, one wire transfer that transits a prohibited correspondent bank, and the legal exposure runs to the hundreds of millions. What the corporate lawyer understands, and what she will tell you in the candor of a private conversation, is that the sanctions regime has always been somewhat porous by design. There are carve-outs for humanitarian goods. There are wind-down provisions when licenses are revoked. There are general licenses for informational materials, for journalistic activity, for certain agricultural exports. These porousnesses are not accidents. They are acknowledgments that a total blockade of a nation of 85 million people is neither practically achievable nor, in the final analysis, politically sustainable. And behind every legal structure, there is a theory of change. The sanctions, we are told, are designed to compel behavioral modification, to make the cost of Iran's nuclear program, its regional proxy network, its ballistic missile development, greater than the cost of negotiation. Whether they have achieved this is a matter of considerable scholarly and political dispute. What they have unambiguously achieved is the construction of an entire legal financial ecosystem, consultancies, law firms, compliance divisions, intelligence products, whose commercial existence depends upon the continuation of the conflict they purport to be resolving. The corporate lawyer files this observation and moves on to the next brief. We have now met the principles of this long impasse. The politician who requires the enemy. The banker who discounts the personality and prices the barrel. The diplomat who speaks in the spaces between official positions. The lawyer who maps the legal terrain of a conflict she did not start and cannot end. What unites them is this: none of them, in their professional capacity, is permitted to say the obvious thing. The obvious thing is that the United States and Iran share, beneath the accumulated sediment of grievance and ideology, a set of structural interests that are not entirely incompatible. Both are threatened by the instability of Afghanistan. Both have reason to fear a nuclear-armed Saudi Arabia. Both have economic populations, young, educated, frustrated, whose futures depend on something other than perpetual confrontation. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 was, at its core, a rejection of a particular mode of subordination, the subordination of Iranian national sovereignty to the strategic preferences of a distant hegemon. This is worth understanding not as an endorsement, but as a fact. The fury of 1979 was not irrational. It was the accumulated interest on decades of imposed arrangements. And America, for its part, has never fully processed the loss of what it believed Iran to be: a stable, pro-Western monarchy, a market, an ally, a piece on the grand chessboard of Cold War containment. The Islamic Republic was not supposed to survive. It has now outlasted 6 American presidents. It has absorbed sanctions, assassinations, cyber attacks, proxy wars. It endures, not because it is loved, but because it has made itself, through a combination of ideology and ruthlessness and genuine popular legitimacy in certain quarters, very difficult to replace. The asymmetric warfare of the present moment, the drone strikes and counterstrikes, the proxy militias and special operations, the hacked centrifuges and assassinated scientists, is, in a profound sense, the continuation of a conversation that neither side has found the political conditions to conduct openly. What would that conversation require? It would require politicians willing to absorb the domestic cost of compromise, bankers willing to structure transactions in the absence of legal certainty, diplomats willing to sit in the same room without preconditions, lawyers willing to draft agreements that their own governments might repudiate. It would require, in short, a quality that is perhaps the rarest commodity in contemporary statecraft: courage. The distance between Washington and Tehran is, by air, approximately 9,700 kilometers. By every other measure, historical, psychological, political, it is considerably further. Whether it can be crossed is a question this generation has so far declined to answer.